Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who made it here and is here. And, I was having numerous conversations with Robin Mermelstein and other people, and we were talking about how this reminds us of the old days of SRNT, where it used to be a smaller conference. You had a lot more opportunity to network, chat with other people. Of course, keep your social distance, keep yourself at least 5 feet apart. But enjoy the conference. We have some great material, and we have done our level best. I think all the symposia are going to have recorded presentations if people are not going to be here. Enjoy the conference, enjoy New Orleans, and thank you for being here. So that said, let's jump right into our first session. This first session is a session where the FDA is going to give us an update on tobacco regulatory science and what they've been doing so far and where they are going. And there are going to be 2 speakers in the session. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them both in the interest of time. And the talks will follow each other. And then at the end, we will have a Q&A session. So our first speaker today is going to be Dr. Matthew Holman, who is currently the director of the Office of Science at Center for Tobacco Products at the FDA. He was appointed to this position in January of 2017. As many of you know, the Office of Science at CTP is responsible for identifying, developing, and enhancing the science related to tobacco products, their use, and the resulting morbidity and mortality so that regulatory decisions can be made to improve public health. To accomplish this goal, they provide the scientific support for regulations and guidance. They review tobacco product applications, evaluate the knowledge bases of regulatory decisions, and carry out a lot of research to fill the gaps in scientific knowledge. Before taking on his current position, Dr. Holman served as the director of the Division of Product Science within CTP's Office of Science for 6 years. In this position, he oversaw evaluation of the composition and design of tobacco products, and was also involved in chemical, microbiological, and engineering research on tobacco products, resulting in numerous publications. He also served as the technical project lead in reviewing over 1,000 side effect reports. And in this position, he was responsible for the overall scientific review of all these reports by CTP. Prior to his tenure at CTP, he worked in FDA's Center for Drug Evaluation and Research on over-the-counter products, and he has served in several positions within CDER, with his last position being Deputy Director of the Division of Non-Prescription Regulation Development. And he has, as you can see, been involved in a number of rulemakings, guidance documents, and other tasks at CTP. Our second speaker is going to be Dr. Tesfa and Alexander. He is the Director of the Division of Research and Evaluation in the Office of Health, Communication, and Education at CTP. In this role, Dr. Alexander leads a team of social and health scientists who are responsible for developing the scientific foundation for CTP's public education campaigns and other health communication initiatives. This division is also responsible for measuring the public health impact of CTP's health communication activities. Dr. Alexander has extensive experience in designing and conducting research studies on social science, marketing, and developing innovative public education and behavior change programs. Before joining FDA, he held positions at well-known nonprofit organizations and marketing advertising agencies, where he was really involved in analyzing qualitative and quantitative data and developing comprehensive reports for use by senior officials and marketing specialists in the development of national public health programs. He also currently serves as an adjunct professor at George Washington University. So, that said, I'm going to stop talking and turn the podium over to our FDA colleagues who will now present their talks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by thanking the organizers of this conference for working with us so that we were able to make this presentation remotely. We really appreciate the extra effort to make this happen. Secondly, before I jump into the talk, just to send regrets from Mitch. He would love to have been able to present alongside of us, but in his absence, me and my colleague, Dr. Tesfa Alexander, we'll be providing you updates across the center and give you some sense of what's happened in the past year since we last provided our update at the last meeting. So what we're going to do is walk through some of the agency-wide initiatives around cessation that we've talked about in the past, tell you where we're at today. Then we're going to jump into regulation and guidance, compliance and enforcement. Then we'll talk about science and research, and as part of that, product review and the vaping lung injuries. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Alexander, to talk to you about health education, health communication and education updates. So let me just start by, presenting what I think all of you guys know, but, we remain focused on our 3 public health goals laid on this slide, and we continue to work diligently across the center to reduce the number of people who start using tobacco products, encourage people that are using these products to stop using them, and then lastly, to reduce the adverse impact for those who continue to use these products. These remain our goals. This remains our focus. But this is quite a challenge. I like to show this slide just to show, this is actually something we took from IOM report, but it shows really how complicated achieving those 3 goals really is. I mean, it seems simple to just lay out these 3 goals, and I think everyone hears them and goes, yeah, that sounds great, but this is really a complicated issue that we're all tackling. And I like to say that, we have our role in this. We show up on this landscape, but all the stakeholders, including all of you viewing us during this conference, have a role to play in this. And we really all need to work together to really try to accomplish these 3 goals that I've laid out on the previous slide. And it's really important work that not only we're doing here at the agency, but really working with all of you guys as we develop additional data, as we talk about additional policy considerations. I think we all have a role to play and really need to work together collectively so that we can achieve the goals laid out on the previous slide. I also like to just point out that, again, these are all statistics I think we all know too well. This is a very significant public health concern. It affects all sectors of society, all ages from young to the oldest in our society. And again, there's a great need to really work together to really have an impact so that these statistics that we're looking on this slide really are changing over time in a positive way. But that, currently today, even in spite of all the work we're all doing, we still have a major public health issue on our hands, and we need to continue to work diligently to really tackle these things. The other thing I like to say is just that, we presented this slide a couple years ago. Past Commissioner Gottlieb laid this out. And just to remind people, this still really is our focus within the center. We're really focused on this continuum of risk idea and really moving people from the most deadly products, combustive products, to the least deadly, least toxic products, least addictive products. That continues to be our focus, and we're laser focused on that overarching goal. And all of our efforts really center around this idea around the continuum of risk. So let me shift into where we're at on cessation. What have we been doing? I think all of you guys are very well aware that we established a agency-wide nicotine steering committee a few years ago. We've held a number of public meetings, continue to work regularly across the agency on this very important issue around, these nicotine-containing products and how to shift people down that continuum of risk. Most importantly, our latest efforts, our latest public health meetings have really focused on youth cessation. We recognized the increased use of e-cigarette products by youth and the lack of understanding of the impact on the youth and how to really help them quit, because a lot of the data, as we're seeing youth uptake increase, we're also collecting data that's showing that, a lot of youth are becoming addicted and would like to stop using these products, and yet we have sort of a dearth of data in this area. And so we've had a couple of workshops around this issue, and we continue to work to try to collect more data and gain a better understanding on this issue, not just within the center, but really across the agency, across the agency. Okay, let's shift to regulations and guidance. And since we last presented to you at the last SRNT meeting, we've issued 3 proposed rules. laid out on this slide, one on SC reports, one on PMTAs, one on cigarette health warnings, and then also to let you know that we're working on a rule that would put in place the Tobacco 21 legislation that I'm going to talk about in a moment, and we're anticipating that coming out in early summer. So let me just kind of walk through a couple of these rules and give you an idea of what's in them. And then I will say the cigarette health warning I'm not going to talk about, but Tesfa will touch on that in his presentation. So the SE proposed rule, we've been working on proposed rules. We've had this program up and running for many years now, but we got out a proposed rule last year that really lays out for applicants what we expect, what information needs to be in those SE reports, how it needs to be organized, so that we can go through it and do our evaluation efficiently and effectively. It also lays out what we're looking for and how we do that evaluation. So as applicants put their SE reports together, they have a sense of what we're looking for and what we're looking to pull out of those reports as we do our evaluation, so that hopefully they have more clarity about what we need to see and can organize their submissions to produce high-quality SE reports and allow us to, again, efficiently and effectively pull the information and data out of those SE reports and make our assessment as to whether the new product is substantially equivalent to the predicate product. That comment period, we received numerous comments during that comment period for that proposed rule. We're currently evaluating those and hope to put out a final rule in the not-too-distant future. The PMTA proposed rule we also got out last year. Again, this lays out what we're looking for and how we'd like to see these applications organized so that we can go through them and pull out the information we need. I think this rule is really important. We don't have a lot of experience or not nearly as much experience with PMTAs as we do with SE reports. And also these PMTAs are much more voluminous than SE reports. There's a lot more data and information in these reports. And so this proposed rule is really critical to really make sure that as we're getting these applications from manufacturers, that this large volumes of data and information are really organized in a way that we can really understand them, go through that data information, understand how it's all laid out, and pull out the information that we need to do our evaluation. Again, part of what it does is lays out, the actual statute lays out some of the details of what's needed in PMTA. We try in this proposed rule to lay out some additional details about, how applicants can provide the information and how we, understand or help them understand, I should say, what the regulations are looking for as it lays out the different pieces of information that are needed. And so we try to, again, give some detail to build upon what's in the regulations so that applicants can provide us the information that we need so that we can make a fully informed decision at the end of the day. It also talks a lot about the procedures around PMTAs, how we're looking to receive these, what the different steps along the way in our review process are, what timelines or expectations are laid out for each of these steps, so that hopefully we provide more transparency and predictability and what that review process looks like for the public. And then lastly, there also is a requirement in this rule to maintain records around these applications so that at any point FDA has access to those records. So for example, if we went on inspection, we could see the records that support a PMTA that has received a positive order and be able to evaluate that information during the inspection process. Next, as I said, we are working on legislation, we're working on regulation that accompanies the legislation that was signed into law at the end of the year. We're very happy and delighted that the President signed legislation that amended the Act to raise the minimum age for purchase of tobacco products across the entire country to 21 years of age. Effective immediately, with that legislation, retailers have not been able to sell any tobacco product to anyone under the age of 21. So obviously this fills a gap. As we saw prior to this legislation, there was a lot of variability from state to state in sales of tobacco products, but now we have legislation across the country that really standardizes it. As a result of that legislation, retailers and FDA began working right away to figure out how to implement that law and make sure that we had in place across all the states. I can tell you we have been very clear. We expect retailers to comply with this law and to take whatever measures, actions they need to put in place right away to make sure that no one under the age of 21 is able to purchase any tobacco product, which includes, for example, ID checks. They're very routinely used with tobacco sales, and making sure that retailers had ways to change that ID check and make sure that they weren't allowing anyone under the age of 21 to purchase these products. The other thing we've been doing is updating our website and trying to provide material we think will be helpful to retailers as they try to implement this new law. And as I said, we're working on a regulation that we expect to get out in June that would further codify and provide useful information and requirements around enforcing this new law at all retail establishments across the country. In terms of guidance, we've actually gotten a number of guidances out in the past year. We actually have gotten out 2 revised guidances. These were guidances we'd already put out in prior years where we need to go back in based on new information, new data, and make revisions to them to reflect, our current understanding of these products and the issues covered within these guidances. We also issued some draft guidances, one around the compliance for deemed products, and then another one around the cigarette plans for cigarette warnings and labeling and advertising, and put those out last year. And then lastly, we put out 4 final guidances. We had draft guidances out on these topic areas in the past. We took feedback that we received in our dockets and issued final guidances. A lot of these are around the deemed products. So the one in last March was around vape shops and requirements, specific to vape shops selling ENDS products. We also put out a final guidance last summer on ENDS PMTAs to provide, again, guidance to manufacturers, applicants who are putting these applications together, to let them know what we're looking for around these application types for these specific types of products. There's also guidance policy, final guidance that went out last November around compliance policy for specific tobacco products. And then lastly, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this one, but just a couple months ago, we put out enforcement guidance around ENDS products and other deemed products that, again, I'm going to walk through in the next couple slides here. So last year, we got our annual NYTS data, and what that showed us is that unfortunately, youth use of e-cigarettes continued to increase last year compared to the year before. We had gone from just over 3.6 million youth using e-cigarettes the previous year to over 5 million high school, middle schoolers using e-cigarettes in last year's data. Obviously, to say this was alarming is an understatement. We had done a lot of actions in the previous year in an effort to reduce youth use, and yet we saw it go up. Another piece of data that was really important that came out last year is that amongst all those youths, again, over 5 million youth using these products, the data points to most of them using, or the biggest category are, cartridge-based or pod-based e-cigarettes. These are really the ones, as opposed to, for example, a tank system that, our kids are using across the country. And then another piece of data that was really insightful was looking at the different flavors amongst youth. What we saw is a clear preference for different flavors amongst youth. And so this slide shows you, going from tobacco to menthol, fruit, mango, that the mint, the mango, the fruit had much higher use by middle school and high school kids than, for example, tobacco and menthol-flavored cartridges or e-liquids. So all that fed into this guidance that we issued at the beginning of the year. What that guidance announced was that we were, at that point forward, going to work on enforcement around unauthorized, in other words, flavored e-cigarette products that had not received a positive marketing order from us that we found to be appealing to youth. What that meant is that both fruit flavors and mint flavored, for example, e-liquids would be an enforcement priority for us. because, again, the data around youth use of these flavors. A lot of questions are, around why did we pick draw the line where we did in that guidance and where we're going to decide to enforce around these products. Again, it's based on the data I just showed you on the previous slides. We recognize that there are some current combustible cigarette users, adult users that are using these products to move down that continuum of risk, that spectrum of risk, to less toxic products. But at the same time, we're seeing, as I showed on the previous slide, huge increases in youth use of these products. So what we're trying to do is balance that, is balance the need for current adult cigarette smokers to have these products available, while at the same time trying to minimize and really reverse the trend we've been seeing over the last couple of years with youth uptake of these products. And that's really what we're trying to do. I do want to make a point. One of the characterizations we've seen frequently since that guidance came out is calling this a ban on flavored or cartridge-based e-cigarettes. It's not a ban at all, but what it does is says to manufacturers of these specific products, if you want to continue to market these products, you need to come in with an application, a marketing application to the agency. We need to evaluate that application, and if we decide that it's appropriate for the protection of public health to put these products on the market, we will do that. We're not saying that we will never have these products on the market. What we're saying is we want to see the data and information from the manufacturers of these products and make sure that we're comfortable that these products should be on the market, that they can provide an alternative to current adult cigarette smokers, while at the same time these products won't continue this trend we're seeing where youth are picking these up and using them. We did begin enforcement, and I'm going to talk about this in a few slides. Starting February 6th, which is when that guidance went into effect, we began ramping up our enforcement activities to go after manufacturers or retailers that were selling these products that did not have authorization from the FDA to be on the market. So again, these are flavored cartridge-based e-cigarette products other than tobacco and menthol flavored. Those are allowed to stay out on the market under enforcement discretion, but all other flavored cartridge-based e-cigarettes had to come off the market as of February 6th of this year. We started looking carefully to figure out whether those products are still being marketed or not, and if they were, to start taking action against retailers. The other thing is we're also continue to look at, and we have been for a couple of years now, products that are targeted to minors or seem to be targeted through their promotion, labeling, and advertising towards minors. So these are the products, for example, that mimic, products, food products that children might be using, or candies or things along those lines. We continue to really focus our efforts in trying to identify those products and go after them and make sure that kids don't have access to those products. I also want to say that after May 12th of this year, we are going to, that is the deadline by which manufacturers of, for example, all other ENDS products, including the tobacco menthol flavored cartridge-based products, they have to submit marketing applications to us at that time. If they submit those applications, they will be allowed, under enforcement discretion, they'll be allowed to stay on the market until May 12th of next year, after which point, if they don't have a positive marketing order from us, they will have to come off the market. So one of the things we're going to do is, come May 13th, we're going to start looking and saying, are there products out there on the market, there deemed products out there on the market where they have not submitted a marketing application to us by May 12th? And if they haven't, we're going to start going after those products and get them off the market. The other thing I want to say, too, is, as I said on the previous slide, we try to strike a balance in this guidance that came out at the beginning of the year of trying to find the right place to sort of make our cut as to which products could stay on the market under enforcement discretion, which ENDS products need to come off. That policy that we announced in January could change at any time. We continue to be vigilant in monitoring and surveying the marketplace and looking at what products are kids using. And, as we get, good data on that, and as that data shows us, if that data shows us, I should say, that that middle schoolers, high schoolers are shifting to other products in place of these ones that we've taken off the market, we will take appropriate action. This is not we are not looking at this going, hey, we did something great in January, we're done, we've taken care of the issue. We are going to continue to monitor this very closely, as close as we can, and we will take additional actions if necessary, if warranted, by the data and information that we receive over the coming months. So now let me shift gears. I've talked about this a little bit, but really focus a little bit more on our compliance and enforcement actions and where we've been over the past year. Just yesterday, we issued 22 warning letters to retailers and manufacturers across the country, focused on retailers and manufacturers that were selling ENDS products that should have been off the market according to our January guidance, yet we found were still being sold in retail establishments. Again, this is just a start. We are going to continue to focus our efforts on enforcement and compliance actions against these types of products, these manufacturers and retailers. We expect to see more of this. If we find there are additional products out there that shouldn't be out there because they needed marking, a positive marking order for us, we're going to continue to do these types of things like you saw in these warning letters yesterday. But just to give you a sense, 22 warning letters, 16 of them were against brick and mortar retailers, including some big names like 7-Eleven and Shell. Again, we found that you could walk into these shops and pick up a cartridge-based flavored ENDS product and purchase it. We also found 6 online retailers that both make and sell cartridge-based e-cigarettes that were continuing to sell those to their websites and were available for purchase. We went after them, issued warning letters to let them know that they need to cease marketing those products immediately, and that they need a marketing order. And if there's not a marketing order for any of these products, they can't be sold either in brick and mortar or through websites or online retail. We have been very active in enforcement actions and have now taken over or completed over 1.1 million inspections of retailers. As a result of those 1.1 million inspections, we've issued over 96,000 warning letters, with 11,000 of them being related to ENDS products. We've also issued over 25,000 civil money penalties, with nearly 2,000 of them being related to ENDS products. And then lastly, as a result of those inspections, we've issued 181 no tobacco sales order complaints, meaning we've told 181 retailers that they can no longer sell tobacco products because they've had a number of prior violations in selling these products to minors when they shouldn't have been. One of the ways that we get useful information around, sales of these products that shouldn't be happening is from the public. So I do want to continue to encourage you, those of you who have used either our website, email, or called into our phone number to report violations, please keep doing this. It's valuable. We do follow up on all of the reports that we get. We look into them to find out whether, in fact, they're accurate, and if they are accurate, then we take one of these actions that I've just laid out. So please continue to share potential violations with us. We do take it seriously and appreciate the help in flagging these potential violations with us. Now I'm going to shift to science and research and can kind of talk through that over the next couple of sections. Let me just start by saying, as the director for the Office of Science, I'm extremely proud of our staff. I consider us to be a world leader in tobacco science at this point. When I made up this slide, we had nearly 250 scientists. I think we're now over 300 scientists that are devoted to doing the work of the center. This is a science-based center. We make science-based decisions, and so I think it's really important that we are world leaders. And as I've laid on this slide, and I say this over and over to people, I'm very proud of the broad expertise that we have in tobacco science. I mean, we cover numerous disciplines laid out here and really take a comprehensive look at the science and make decisions where we integrate all these different disciplines to make sure that we're making the best policy decisions possible based on the best data possible. At this point, we have really extensive experience and knowledge across our Office of Science. We've now been in this business of regulating these products for over 10 years and really built up a very robust scientific base. We continue to hire a diverse staff with really strong scientific backgrounds from all sectors, with all different scientific disciplines, as well as experiences coming in into the office, and really proud of that, and think it's vitally important, again, as a science-based organization to have such a strong Office of Science. Just as one sort of quick illustration of that, we've been very busy over the past almost 10 years now, and pulling together data and producing scientific manuscripts. So we're now up to over 225 publications that we have at least one scientist in our Office of Science that is a co-author on that. Really proud of that. It continues to be an important part of our work as regulators, is to make sure that we're continuing to drive the research around these products in all these different areas, all these different disciplines. All of that I'm talking about, this research, the scientific expertise and knowledge, all feeds into our product review programs. We take all that data and information, and we really utilize it a lot during application review. So I just want to sort of talk about application review and where we're at on that. I'll start with our EX and SE programs. So far, we've looked at, or we've received, I should say, over 3,000 regular SE reports, over 3,500 provisional SE reports, and over 700 exemption requests. Of those, I'm very proud to say that we've actually closed out, meaning we've taken a final action. We've either issued a positive action or a negative action, but we've completed our review of these SE reports or EXs, and you can see that from EX through provisional to regular SE reports, we've closed out 83 to 95% of these applications. And we've, over the last actually couple of years, met or exceeded all of our performance measures in terms of the timeliness of taking action on these application types. We've actually issued a couple PMTA decisions over the last year that I want to just kind of talk through. I'm sure you guys are aware of these, but just kind of let you know if you're not. Last April, we issued positive marketing orders for Philip Morris IQOS products. We issued positive orders for both the device as well as 3 versions of heat sticks that would be used with these devices. The way these things work is there's an electronic device. You put in a heat stick, which looks like a small cigarette, and then as the user inhales, it pulls hot air from the device across that heat stick, and so the consumer, the user, is inhaling the volatiles that come off that heat stick with the hot air moving across those. At the end of the day, we gave a positive marketing order for the device and these 3 heat sticks because we felt like the applications and what we knew about these products demonstrate that they were appropriate for the protection of public health. And really that was driven by the toxicant levels. The toxicant levels and the emissions from these heat sticks are much significantly lower than those of combusted cigarettes that are burned and combusted. But I do want to say it's really important to note that we were extremely stringent in our marketing restrictions around youth, access, youth use, youth exposure. As I just talked about a few moments earlier, we've seen a scary, disturbing trend in increased use of e-cigarettes by youth. We wanted to make sure as these novel products went onto the U.S. market that we weren't going to see a similar trend. And so really focus a lot of attention around what do we know about these products, how they'll be used when they went on the market. And I'm going to talk about in a few minutes how we monitor that to make sure that that's not happening. And that's really our post-marketing commitments. And again, I'll go into a little bit more detail on a later slide, but that was a key piece, is to make sure we had those post-marketing requirements in place so that we could monitor the use of these products, particularly the use by youth. Also, at the end of the year, we issued positive marketing orders for 2 combusted filter cigarettes made by 22nd Century that are marketed under the brand names of Moonlight. There's a Moonlight and a Moonlight menthol version. These are combusted cigarettes that have very low levels of nicotine compared to commercially available, commercially marketed combusted cigarettes. Again, at the end of our evaluation, we found these were appropriate for the protection of public health for a couple reasons. One, because of the very low levels of nicotine in these products, they offer the potential for reduced nicotine dependence among addicted adult smokers. The potential benefit there then is decreasing nicotine exposure and ultimately cigarette consumption among current adult cigarette smokers. But then in addition to looking at smokers, we also need to look at non-smokers. And so when we looked at non-smokers, particularly youth, because of the low nicotine levels, we felt like the data indicated that non-users, including youth, were very unlikely to start using these products, and that non-users who did pick these products and experiment with them were very likely to become, very unlikely, to become addicted to these products, especially when you look at, experimentation with other commercially marketed cigarettes, combusted cigarettes that have much higher levels of nicotine in them. Also want to point out that last fall, we issued our first modified risk, positive orders under our modified risk program. We issued orders for 8 Swedish Match snus products that are sold under the general brand name. We authorized use of a modified risk claim that reads, using general snus instead of cigarettes puts you at a lower risk of mouth cancer, heart disease, lung cancer, stroke, emphysema, and chronic bronchitis. So in issuing those orders and conducting our evaluation of these applications, again, some of the key areas we looked at is, one, were the claims substantiated that I just read, these different health endpoints. Was there data showing that there's lower risk when using these products instead of cigarettes? And at the end of the day, we found that the evidence was convincing that there was lower risk of these health endpoints compared to cigarettes. We also looked at, do consumers understand this claim, and do they appropriately perceive the relative risk of these products compared to cigarettes? And again, we felt like the data that was provided and other data we're aware of were compelling that, in fact, consumers did and could understand this claim and the relative risk of these general snus products compared to cigarettes. And then lastly, we ultimately concluded that these products would be, if they were used by consumers, would significantly reduce the harm and the risk of these tobacco-related diseases. And ultimately, if that was to happen for individual consumers, we felt that the benefit to the population as a whole was very positive. And so ultimately, we approved this modified risk claim to be used in advertising and labeling for these 8 general snus products. We do also have some other MRTPAs that are under review. They're all at various stages. I'm showing them on the slide here. We've had TIPSEC meeting on all of these. They've all had comment periods. The very low nicotine cigarettes submitted by 22nd Century, the comment period is still open. The other ones have closed. We're evaluating the comments received and integrating them into our assessment of these products and the modified risk claims that are being sought. But I just sort of want to wrap up discussion around application review to say, these are very complicated decisions that we have to make for these products, whether they come under SE, EX, PMTA, MRTPA. But at the end of the day, we have the scientific expertise, and we apply that expertise to making sure that we're making the best decision possible for public health based on the data that we have, information we have at our disposal. These are multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary discussions, evaluations, decisions that are being made. I think, again, just want to remind people that we are, this is a science-based decision-making process. And we really take that very seriously and are very proud of the work we have done, very proud of the work we are currently doing and will do. Lastly, I just want to shift gears a little bit and go to research. And as I said earlier, research that we're directly involved in, research that we fund, research that we're not funding that's being done around tobacco products is critically important in order for us to make these very complicated policy decisions. We need the best data we can possibly get our hands on to make sure that as we make these decisions, they're having a positive impact on both users and non-users, the population as a whole. I showed you at the very beginning this sort of complex landscape that we're all sort of playing a part in and have our piece of. It really, really is important, when we think about regulatory science, that all stakeholders that are in this arena contribute to it, collect data, to get it out there, to share it with not just us, but all stakeholders, so that as our knowledge and the data is evolving, all stakeholders can follow the evolution and can inform the future research in the most productive, effective ways. We've worked really hard to have broad stakeholder engagement. We hope that other stakeholders are doing the same because we think this collaboration, this sharing of information, sharing of ideas, sharing of interpretation of data is really important to make sure that, again, we all understand the current landscape, and as it shifts, we're able to shift with it and know where it's at. I'm not going to go in detail what's in these squares here, but one of the questions we still often get is, what is regulatory science, and more specifically, what's tobacco regulatory science? Again, you can read what's on the slide. I just say in general, we're looking for science that really can directly or pretty close to directly inform our regulatory decisions. We're looking for things that we can take this data and use it to drive decisions. And, I talked about, as an example, NYTS data. That has been very informative. We've taken that data and really directly implemented some actions based on that data and this trend in youth use. That's the type of things we're talking about with regulatory science. And so I wanted to share that. Then also I want to talk about just sort of our research program and our portfolio a little bit here. Our research program is intentionally very broad. As I showed on the previous slide, there's a lot of scientific disciplines that really we need to have data around. But also there's a lot of different products. There's different user populations. There's different non-user populations. We're trying to collect data, and really our research program is really around this, is to make sure it's really diverse and that we're not missing any sort of corner, any sort of facet of tobacco regulatory science that we need to. And I think part of this too is knowing that, and we've seen this just in the almost 11 years now that we've existed, that the public health challenges can be unpredictable. I think sometimes we can predict some of these, and sometimes we can't. We want to make sure that we're not singularly focused on a given issue or type of product. We want to make sure that we're really covering the gambit so that as new issues emerge, we're seeing them as real time as possible, and we're able to shift our research, shift our regulatory priorities in the right direction. That being said, there are certainly some areas of focus where we're devoting more of our research program attention to. I don't think these will surprise anyone. One area of focus is e-cigarette flavors, particularly around trying to understand this dichotomy between youth initiation and adult switching. Like, how do we find the right balance to allow adult combustible cigarette smokers to switch to less toxic products, less addictive products, while at the same time not opening the doors and increasing youth use of tobacco products. And so we have a lot of research going on in that area. We expect to continue based on how challenging and difficult this problem is to continue there. Also, the e-cigarette pulmonary illness is another area, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment here, where we continue to focus some of our research around that to try to get a better handle on what caused these pulmonary illnesses, what is causing them, how do we prevent something like this from happening again in the future. And then again, another area is low nicotine cigarettes. We've been talking about this publicly for years now. How do we deal with this continuum of risk and shift people away from combustible cigarettes towards, either away from tobacco products altogether, at least, if not down this continuum of risk. We think low nicotine cigarettes have a part to play that, and we continue to look at research around those products. Another big area is just really rapid monitoring surveillance. The marketplace has changed very quickly over the last couple of years. Use behavior has changed very, very rapidly over the last couple of years. We continue to devote a lot of effort and resources towards how do we collect good data, robust data, and collect it as real time as possible so that as we're seeing shifts, we can adjust those shifts as quickly as possible and not have huge lag times. We're looking to be, how can we get more frequent data around surveillance? How can we make it more agile? So as we start to see signals, as we start to see an uptick in certain product use or by certain user populations, that we can quickly adjust our surveillance tools to shift in the areas we need to shift. And then how can we be more product specific? As I talked about earlier, as we saw youth use of e-cigarettes go up, what we saw is that they're using particular flavors a lot more than other flavors, that they're using cartridge-based products more than non-cartridge-based flavors. How do we collect good data and on those specific products to see whether there are trends and use around those things? So these are some things we're working on, but I do want to emphasize, we need to partner with, we have been partnering with, we need to continue to partner with a lot of stakeholders in this, because this is a complicated problem. The data, we need a very robust data set to make decisions. So I encourage you that are working in this area to continue to work. Those of you guys who aren't working in it, maybe be an area that you might consider working in, so that we can get this data as quickly as possible and make well-informed decisions as quickly as possible. I do want to talk about another area of surveillance, and I mentioned this earlier. For both our PMTAs and our MRTPAs, where we've issued positive orders, we have put a lot of effort into what are the requirements for post-marketing surveillance and studies that we need. So as we've issued these positive orders and allowed products on the market or allowed certain labeling to accompany these products on the market, how do we make sure that it's having the impact we want? For example, how do we make sure that youth aren't picking up these products and starting to use them as they go on the market? So we have put in those positive order letters, those marketing authorization letters, we've put some very detailed, specific requirements around what the applicants, manufacturers of this product must do to be able to monitor what's going on with their products. And we get that information in on a set frequency. We are and will continue to monitor that. And if we see signals that the marketing, the access, the use of these products is not in alignment with what we think is appropriate for the protection of public health, we will have that information at our fingertips, as real time as possible. We'll make decisions quickly. We have the authority to be able to make whatever decisions we want, including taking those authorizations away if we need to, or maybe leaving the authorization in place, but requiring some additional restrictions around the marketing or labeling or advertising. So I just want to make sure people are clear, because I think a lot of people don't really understand the authorities we have as we issue those positive orders to really collect useful, meaningful data, real data with these products out there on the market, and really get a handle on how are they being used, how are they being viewed and perceived, and who has access to them, who's using these products. Okay, to shift gears again to the vaping lung injuries, we have been working with a lot of stakeholders across the country, both inside, outside the government, federal and state and local government. As of about a month ago, there were over 2,800 people who had been hospitalized that had used an e-cigarette or vaping product and who had, what we're now calling a valley, but basically they had lung injury. Unfortunately, that resulted, at least about a month ago, in 68 deaths from use of these e-cigarette or vaping products as a result of this lung injury. We continue to work on this issue and try to identify, additional causes. What I can tell you right now is there still has not been a single substance that's identified in all the samples tested that we can say this substance is the cause. That being said, we do know some things. We do know that amongst the reports we've got and the samples we've collected, that THC containing e-cigarettes or vape products were very commonly used. And there seems to be at least a pretty strong link to those in these cases of E-Valley. We also have some pretty strong evidence from our sample testing that vitamin E acetate was found in a lot of the samples that we tested from patients who were confirmed as having E-valley, and these samples came from across the country. So we don't know enough now to say, we can't definitively say vitamin E acetate is the cause, but there's certainly a strong link between vitamin E acetate, and the patients we found that were positively confirmed as positive for E-valley. But that being said, as I just talked about, we don't feel like we know everything that we need to know about E-valley. So about a month ago, we issued a request for information, hoping that we can obtain additional information and potentially data around these cases of E-valley. So we opened up a docket. It's opened up for another month. Please, if you have any information or you know anyone that has information that might be helpful as we continue to evaluate E-valley, please submit a docket or encourage them to submit a docket. We're looking for things that, like, is there something about product design that may be leading to E-valley? Are there specific chemicals or constituents that are leading to E-valley in addition to potentially vitamin E acetate? Is some of this being driven by consumer user modification of the products? There are a lot of potential causes of E-valley, but right now we just don't have enough data and information from the adverse event reporting that we've got to date to really put our finger on it and know with certainty, what are the 1, 2, 3, 4 causes of these unfortunate cases, serious health consequences. So please, we have a safety reporting portal. We got a lot of good information in that. If you have information, people that have information, please encourage them to report it to us. We look at every single report that comes in. We have a large team of staff across the center that look into each and every one of the reports that we receive to try to pull out whatever information we can to identify, any adverse event, E-valley, or any other potential adverse event that we have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague so that he can talk about health education and health communication education. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Great. Well, I was going to start off and ask you all to give us a hearty hello, just to make sure that there were still folks in the room, but that applause confirms that you all are there. As a follow-up to Dr. Holman's update, I'll be providing an update on our health communication and education activities here at the Center for Tobacco Products. While there are a lot of activities that we engage in here at the center under the topic of health communication and education, I'll primarily focus on the work that we've been doing under cigarette health warnings, as well as our efforts to combat youth e-cigarette use through our paid media efforts, our partnerships, as well as other communication activities. So starting off with cigarette health warnings, as many of you all know, we plan at FDA to meet next week's court-ordered deadline of March 15th, 2020 for publishing the cigarette health warnings final rule. When finalized, this new rule will represent the most significant change to cigarette warning labels over the past 35 years. As we look towards next week's deadline, it's worth taking a historical look back at all the work that has taken place to get us to, and all the events to get us to next week's final, intended final proposed rule, final rule, excuse me. I'm going to go through this timeline relatively quickly because many of you all are likely familiar with these activities. And it starts back and dates back to 2011 when we published our final rule requiring color graphics depicting the negative health consequences of smoking to accompany the textual health warning statements specified in the TCA. That final rule was challenged in court by several tobacco companies about a year later and vacated by the U.S. Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia, being held that it violated the First Amendment. In March 2013, the federal government announced its decision not to seek further review of the court's ruling. Since that time, FDA has been conducting comprehensive research and development activities in support of a new health warnings proposed rule to satisfy the requirements within the TCA based on and within the limits of both the science and the law. Following a lawsuit filed by several public health groups, a judge in the U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts issued an order in March 2019 directing FDA to publish the new proposed rule by August of 2019, and again, the final rule next week of March 15, 2020. In compliance with that court order, FDA issued the new cigarette health warnings proposed rule on August 15, 2019, and we know the final rule is for March 15, 2020. A few things to note related to cigarette health warnings. The cigarette health warnings that are currently proposed provide an enormous public health opportunity for us to fulfill here at FDA and fulfill the statutory mandate under the TCA and address substantial gaps which we know exist in the public's knowledge of health risk of cigarette smoking. Research that we've conducted and that others have conducted show that textual warning statements currently on cigarette packages and in advertisements are not adequate, and they do not address information gaps the public holds about the health risk of smoking. And therefore, central to our work in supporting the August 2019 proposed rule and what will be the final rule has been evaluating how to address the DC Circuit's critiques of the prior rule, as well as carefully developing and implementing a research plan and a rulemaking process that provides a robust record in support of a new cigarette health warnings rule. Of value to this group and to us, I think, is going through the science-based and overview of the science-based and iterative research process that the agency took to undertake the developing of new cigarette health warnings that would advance the government's substantial interest in promoting public understanding of the negative health consequences of smoking. This was a cross-cutting activity and process that involved a number of subject matter experts and scientists throughout the center who work collaboratively to assess knowledge about cigarette smoking harms, obtain reactions to draft warning statements, assess which, if any, textual warning statements promote greater public understanding of the risks associated with cigarette smoking when compared with textual statements in the TCA, and lastly, assess the potential effectiveness of image concepts. I'll walk through three phases or three categories of the research process, starting with our warning statements. We conducted focus groups to assess knowledge about cigarette smoking harms and obtain reactions to draft warning statements, as well as an experimental study that included over 2,000 participants to assess which, if any, revised textual warning statements promote greater public understanding of the risk associated with cigarette smoking when compared to the statements in the TCA. Our research on images included in-depth interviews to examine initial image concepts to assess whether they are clear, attention-grabbing, worth remembering, credible, and relevant, as well as if any of those concepts provided new information. That research is followed by focus groups to examine whether factual information the images conveyed to participants about the negative health consequences of cigarette smoking in the absence of a paired textual warning statement, as well as how concordant participants considered the images to be when paired with potential textual warning statements. We also conducted research that combined warning statements and images, and that included an experimental study with over 9,000 participants to assess the extent to which any of the cigarette health warnings increased understanding of the negative health consequences of smoking. The warnings will be required 15 months after the final rule is issued to appear on cigarette packages and cigarette advertisements. For the cigarette packages, they will be required to occupy the top 50% of the front and rear panels of cigarette packages, and for cigarette advertisements, occupying at least 20% of the top area. The comprehensive approach that we've undertaken here at the center informed the development of these 13 cigarette warnings that you see on the slide that are included in the proposed rule. As you see, these cigarette warnings depict the health consequences or health conditions, that are less known by the public to be caused by smoking, such as bladder cancer, diabetes, and conditions that cause blindness. These warnings provide an enormous opportunity to increase the public's understanding of those risks. We're especially encouraged here at the center that the research we conducted on these warnings demonstrate that they would lead to improved understanding among youth, among adults, smokers, as well as non-smokers. Now transition to our efforts to combat youth e-cigarette use through our paid media efforts as well as our other communication initiatives. It goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, combating e-cigarette use among youth is a top priority for us here at the center for reasons that we all are too familiar with. As part of our comprehensive approach to address the epidemic of youth e-cigarette use, FDA launched the Real Cost Vaping Prevention Campaign in September of 2018 with hard-hitting advertisements that communicate the risk and the cost associated with youth e-cigarette use. And we initially launched those advertisements and creative assets on digital and social media channels. The initial launch of the Real Cost Vaping campaign included a concept, creative advertising that communicated the negative impact of nicotine on the developing brain. A screenshot of that ad is on the left side of the screen, which is titled Rehacked. We followed up with communicating the negative consequences of vaping, including damage to your lungs, with Epidemic, which is in the middle of the screen. And then most recently, or I shouldn't say most recently, as a follow-up to that, in July of 2019, we expanded our work from digital and social media channels to include advertising on TV with the introduction of Magic, which is on the right side of the screen. And that advertisement communicates the fact that teens who vape are more likely to start smoking cigarettes. The Real Cost Vaping campaign draws on what we've learned and been able to accomplish with our youth cigarette prevention campaign efforts. As a public health community, rightfully so, we celebrate the historic declines in youth cigarette use, and at the same time are largely, and again, rightfully so, concerned with the rapid increases in youth e-cigarette use. Continuing on that topic, it's important for us to look back at our shared success in reducing youth e-cigarette use to historic lows and understand and recognize the value of public education campaign and having a role in that in addition to other tobacco control efforts. We know that strong, well-designed, sustained media campaigns are a critical component of a comprehensive tobacco control approach to reduce population-level tobacco use. The Real Cost has demonstrated, the Real Cost Cigarette Prevention Campaign, its success in reducing youth tobacco use. And the success is largely due to the fact that the campaign is rooted in science, has a strong theoretical behavior change foundation, and that foundation cuts through and is found as evident through the development of the campaign, planning, and execution of the campaign. This is a logic model that shows our process for both developing and assessing the impact of the Real Cost Cigarette Prevention Campaign. And I'll share this some context to share some insights of how we are going about our work with the Real Cost E-Cigarette Prevention Campaign. This logic model follows three sequential steps for leading to behavior change. That's based on the theory of planned behavior, CDC's best practices for developing public education campaigns, as well as a number of science-based factors. We know through our work and historically that in order to have a successful campaign, you first need to start off with a high level of ad awareness and receptivity, and then in turn, which likely, if executed correctly, will lead to a significant impact when it comes to changes in campaign targeted attitudes and beliefs, And so that will be a precursor, again, if executed correctly, to changes in tobacco use intentions and behaviors. For the Real Cost Cigarette Prevention Campaign, we've seen success in all three areas. We have data and published this information where we show that virtually 9 out of 10 youth in the U.S. were aware of the real cost cigarette prevention messaging. We had significant impacts when it came to targeted attitudes and beliefs from the campaign, and thus that resulted in the campaign preventing up to 587,000 youth from initiating smoking, which led to significant downstream cost savings throughout the U.S. Building on that model, I want to share results that we have to date on the Real Cost e-cigarette prevention campaign. The campaign is in its early stages, and we have initial evaluation results to share. Similar to the Real Cost Cigarette Prevention Campaign, we are engaging in a nationally representative longitudinal study to assess the impact of the Real Cost e-cigarette campaign. This study tracks and includes a cohort of over 4,000 youth, ages 11 to 16 years old, with a series of follow-up studies in addition to our baseline study planned. And thus far, we've collected we have two modes of data collected. Baseline data, which was collected in June through October 2018, and follow-up data April through July 2019. I'll share some initial results from the e-cigarette prevention campaign that focuses on awareness and receptivity to the real cost. Starting with brand awareness, we see that there is approximately 79% awareness of the Real Cost brand with this new cohort of youth at follow-up 1. And when it comes to ad awareness, we have adequate levels of ad awareness. Approximately 73.4% of youth reported awareness of our Rehacked campaign, which was on air longer than our epidemic campaign, which has 39.4% of youth awareness, and our epidemic campaign was on air for about a few months prior to data collection for follow-up 1. Receptivity is also an important factor, an early sign of potential success for our campaign and our ads, and we see comparable levels of receptivity using validated measures of perceived ad effectiveness to our cigarette prevention campaign, where both Rehacked and epidemic ads are youth respond to have a perceived score of 3.8 out of a 5-point scale. While our campaign is prevention focused, we recognize the need throughout FDA, and this was touched on in Dr. Holman's update, that now more than ever, a significant amount of youth are experiencing, recognizing, and acknowledging the signs of addiction from e-cigarette use. This is evident in NYTS data. Out of the 5 million youth who report use of e-cigarettes, 1.6 million reported frequent use on 20 or more days. And even more alarming, nearly 1 million youth report use daily. We also see signs of youth use and addiction more accurately in our research. Early research that we've conducted with teens suggested that teens realized that e-cigarettes can be addictive. However, they were not concerned about becoming addicted to e-cigarettes because they did not see the products as harmful. That has changed. In recent focus groups conducted with teens, an overwhelming majority of them expressed seeing signs of addiction with their peers and even with themselves. Vaping is a part of their daily ritual, a part of their daily lives, as well as part of the daily lives of their peers. And what they often communicate is that when that's interrupted, they acknowledge seeing negative behaviors both within themselves and amongst their peers, and experiencing negative behaviors such as irritability, irrational anxiety, and other negative behaviors as a result of losing access to vaping. In an effort to address the addictive nature of youth e-cigarette use, we recently launched new ads that feature teen true stories that express both the physical and emotional effects of e-cigarette addiction among teens. And these ads are based on our formative research findings that show that teens have a strong desire to have control over their lives. And we want to communicate to them that every time they vape, there's an increased risk of losing control and independence. So at this time, we will share two ads that we recently launched, and I believe you all will show them in the room.
My anxiety got really bad after I started vaping, and I was never an anxious person before. I started having panic attacks. I couldn't really breathe, like my heart was beating so fast. At first, I didn't think it was like addictive. I thought I was kind of stronger than it, but soon I realized like it was holding kind of a power over me. I was always craving more and more, like it was never enough. When I quit vaping, I had a lot more energy. I'm someone that has done it, and it's not worth the consequences that are gonna come.
I play baseball. Vaping made it harder to play. As an athlete, you have to focus. Having something that you're addicted to, it takes away from that focus. My addiction actually got me suspended from school. My little brother, he was embarrassed of what I did. He didn't want to be seen with me. He didn't see me as the same big brother that he always saw. I have to live with what it did to me to this day.
In addition to our paid media efforts, we have also partnered with our colleagues at the National Cancer Institute to launch new e-cigarette cessation content on Smoke-Free Teen, giving youth comprehensive behavioral techniques to help them deal with cravings, navigate peer pressure, as well as prepare to quit and make it through their quit day. We see a significant demand for this content, with having over 500,000 page views since the content was launched in July of 2019, with most time spent on how to quit vaping, as well as pages and content that communicates vaping addiction and nicotine withdrawal. Recognizing the need for other organizations at various levels to have access to e-cigarette prevention content, we also, for the first time, are making our ads available through CDC's Media Campaign Resource Center. The Don't Get Hacked by Vaping ad and creative content is available for stakeholders to use, and co-branding is permitted. There are no fees associated with using this ad. However, interested parties do have to pay talent rights. And we do ask, as a courtesy, if you do use this ad, that you provide your measurements for TRP data and exposure so that we can account for that in our outcome evaluation survey. There are other resources that are available for partners to use, and those are available on our CTP Exchange Lab, and that content includes messaging not just on the harms of vaping, but other tobacco products as well. I also want to highlight the work that we have undertaken in a partnership with Scholastic in providing educational resources for youth in grades 6 through 12. We've partnered with Scholastic to provide educational programming for those students in a co-branded effort to bring content that teachers and school officials can use to communicate the harms of vaping. This is an example of some of that content. So there are a number of efforts by FDA, including our tobacco prevention efforts, as well as efforts highlighted by Dr. Holman and other efforts that you all are aware of, to address youth e-cigarette use. And during a time of increased youth utilization of vapes products, as well as widespread attention to the issue of youth vaping by the public health community, we've assessed youth beliefs and risk perceptions about vaping. And we see that collectively we're moving in the right direction. in assessing the variation in agreement with belief statements among youth by their self-reported use of vape products, you can see that there are significant changes in youth beliefs around vaping. And more specifically, we see that 29 out of 36 items assessing youth beliefs about vaping change in the direction of increased risk perceptions and as well as improved knowledge of harm. Importantly, we're seeing impact in terms of youth beliefs changing among those who are most at risk and among those who report use, where belief levels and trajectories vary based on youth's trial and current use of vaping products. In the harm group, current vape users at baseline had significantly higher changes compared to all other groups. This environment overall provides a unique opportunity for us as a public health community to continue to influence the narrative around vaping. At an FDA, we continue not just with our public education campaigns, but also with our other activities to take a comprehensive as well as an aggressive approach to combating the epidemic levels of youth e-cigarette use and continue to track the impact of our work overall. Hopefully it's evident to you all by Dr. Holman's update, my update, as well as just generally your experience with FDA that a science-based approach drives everything that we do. And science drives all of our decisions, from our compliance and enforcement actions to our rulemaking process to our application review, as well as our communication and education activities. And therefore, a science-based approach goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, it's crucial to all of our regulatory programs and our overall mission. And regulatory science research is critical to understanding the impact of the manufacturing, marketing, and distribution of tobacco products and on its impact on our public health. And we continue to strengthen our research program, and as a part of strengthening that program, it's not just the work that we're doing in the center, but it's also the work that you all are doing to build the body of evidence and research that we can use both within the center and beyond the center to impact and better learn what work can be done to have a positive public health impact when it comes to tobacco control. With that, since we have your attention, we wanted to put a plug in for recruiting efforts that we are conducting currently throughout the center. Dr. Holman mentioned that the Office of Science has grown from 250 people to 300 people, and we're growing even more. And we're growing scientists throughout the center, and we're recruiting at all levels and all backgrounds. We are recruiting as high as the senior science advisor level and actively recruiting and looking for an experienced senior science advisor, as well as recruiting at lower levels, postdocs, and other levels throughout the center. So we encourage you all to visit fda.gov/CTPjobs for opportunities that are advertised throughout the center. Unfortunately, we are not there with you all at SRNT, but if you have any questions about job opportunities or other questions for us, here is some contact information that you all can reach us by. With that, I believe we'll open it up for Q&A.
Okay, thank you. That was a great set of talks, Dr. Holman and Alexander. Thank you for both your talks, very informative. I'm going to open this up for questions. Now, could you please announce your name and your affiliation before you ask us your question? Go ahead, Jed.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jed Rose of Duke University Medical Center, and thank you for the very informative presentations. I just had one question about, toward the latter end of the most recent presentation, the statement that using e-cigarettes causes people to be more likely to take up smoking. I think the wording clearly implied a cause and effect relation, and my read of the literature is there's really no convincing evidence of a cause and effect. There are so many differences between kids who are more likely to experiment with inhaling nicotine from any source compared to kids who are not going to be experimenting with inhaling nicotine, that we don't really know that it's not just the individual differences that make some kids more likely to experiment with inhaling, burning the products of combustion or e-cigarettes. So in terms of the interest in standards of rigorous science, do you really want to go that far because in terms of trying to discourage vaping among youth, it's a laudable goal, but I think we have to be careful about distinguishing between what is known and what is maybe suspected.
Yeah. Thank you for that point and for that question. What I would say is the language that we use, we're very careful in the language that we use, and in our advertisement and our content, we specifically state that youth who use e-cigarettes have an increased risk of using cigarettes to transition to cigarettes. And as the science is evolving and we're learning more, we base that content based on research that was published in JAMA. I don't remember the exact date, but we're making sure that as we communicate the harms of e-cigarette use, that we are providing factual and credible science and information to inform our public education campaigns and messaging.
Thank you.
Andrea?
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm Andrea King, University of Chicago. And I had a question about adjusting surveillance in terms of what's been out the past few months about the disposable nicotine salt cartridge products that are very popular. And there's been articles saying there's a loophole in that they still have flavors. They're very cheap, and youth are starting to switch preference. And I wondered about FDA's comments on those disposables.
Sure. So those are certainly some of the products that we're looking at. We are continuing to monitor very closely those products to see if, in fact, kids are picking those up at a higher frequency than they had been before our policy change. And as I said in my presentation, if we get information showing that, in fact, that is what's happening, then we will take a strong action against to make sure that that doesn't continue to happen. So right now we don't have data to know for sure that's happening, but that is something that's certainly part of our surveillance.
Thank you. Any other questions? I thought there was someone here, but maybe that was the same question. Okay. 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 If no one else has questions, I'm going to take the chair's prerogative and ask a question. In terms of one of the most popular ways that many of these products are advertised is through social media. And what I would like to ask is, does the FDA have any authority to extend their regulations to social media websites? And do you have any plans for doing so? Because that seems to be where youth get most of their information about these products from.
So in terms of, I'll answer the latter part of your question. We actively monitor social media to assess youth perceptions, conversations around tobacco use. And going back to Matt's point around rapid surveillance, we consider social media listening tools and monitoring social media as a critical component of our rapid surveillance and expanding our surveillance to complement more traditional measures of tracking youth perceptions, risk, say national surveys. And so what I would say, Suchitra, is that we recognize that that's where a lot of youth get their information from. And in addition to monitoring our own social channels, we are monitoring other channels to keep a track of new and emerging trends when it comes to youth use and perceptions.
Yeah, and the thing I'd add to that, that's great. And I guess the piece I'd add to that really is in alignment with what Tesfa just said is, I talked about the requirements after we issue a positive order on our PMTA and MRTPA programs. That is certainly a key component of those requirements because, as I said, we're really focused. Certainly one of our areas of high concern is youth initiation, and so that is something that we include in the requirements for manufacturers of those products, is to keep tabs on that.
Okay, thank you. David?
Hey, Matt, this is David Ashley. So a couple of questions. I had to step out for about 10 minutes, so I may have missed it. But is there anything you can say about any progress with the moving towards a final rule for N&N in smokeless tobacco or a proposed rule on reduced nicotine in cigarette tobacco?
Yeah, I could say, weren't you supposed to do those before you left?
Yeah, I was. But I handed that to you, Matt, so.
Well, that wasn't clear in the handoff.
So now I get to ask the questions.
No, I mean, those are definitely areas that we're still working on. I can't say definitively, when we'll take any action, but certainly those are still very much on our radar and things that we're very much interested in continuing to pursue.
Okay, any other questions? If not, thank you to both of you. I'm sorry you could not see us, but you have an audience who sat here through all the talks and was very much listening to everything you were saying and in attention. So thank you for that, and we appreciate your, providing your talks through this format.
Thank you very much.